So, welcome everyone to today's session on how to diversify your talent pool for commercial success. We are excited to explore practical strategies that you can apply directly to your recruitment efforts. In time when skill shortages are impacting business growth, tapping into new and diverse talent sources is more critical than ever. So in today's webinar, we're going to discuss three topics: the opportunity, diversification strategies, and creating a supportive workplace environments. So I'd like to introduce our guests that have joined us today. We've Paula Voos, HR partner at Glenveagh. Paula has over 15 years experience in human resources and brings a wealth of knowledge in areas such as talent acquisition, performance management, employee engagement, diversity, inclusion, and well-being. At Glenveagh, Paula leads strategic HR initiatives to attract and retain top talent while focusing on inclusive and engaging workplace culture. Under her leadership, Glenveagh has been recognised as the first construction company to achieve Gold Investors in Diversity Award from the Irish Centre of Diversity, which is an incredible milestone, so well done on that. Next, we'd like to welcome Claire Hayes, Head of Policy and Research at the Open Doors Initiative. Claire is a passionate advocate for equitable opportunities, combining her experience in communications, political inclusion, and strategy with a deep commitment to making real-world impact. At the Open Doors Initiative, Claire develops inclusive policies that are both data-driven and shaped by personal lived experiences, ensuring that they foster positive change for diverse communities. Currently pursuing a master's degree in social policy in the University of Cork, Claire is dedicated to bridging the gap between theory and practice, translating academic research into impactful strategies for inclusion in the workplace. And then finally, we've Tegwin Stevenson is Ireland country lead for Talent Beyond Boundaries. Tegwin brings over 20 years of experience in migration, stakeholder engagement, and policy reform, with a strong background in legislative changes, research, and advocacy. She oversees the management and delivery of two EU-funded refugee labour migration programmes, which have successfully relocated 7 individuals into Ireland this year, providing life-changing opportunities. Her work is focused on leveraging talent and skills migration to create a positive impact in the workplace, while supporting the integration of refugees into local economies. So welcome all. Thanks a million for joining us and glad to have you all on board. So we'll just dive straight in. So our discussion today is understanding the opportunity, and kick things off by talking about the biggest challenges companies are facing right now, which is skills shortages. Globally, we are seeing unprecedented levels of this issue. According to Manpower Group's 2023 Talent Shortage Survey, staggering 69% of employers are reporting difficulty filling roles. And this just isn't in one sector, it's across the board in all sectors. So I'd love one of our speakers to give me their thoughts on how they're seeing these shortages play out and where do they see the biggest gaps right now. Who'd like to take that one?
I can kick off there, Jamie. And
perfect, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks for the warm welcome and for the invitation to join this really interesting discussion. There's a well-reported shortage of skills in the construction industry, and partly it's due to a sort of hangover from the crash in the mid-2000s, whereby we had people leaving the trades, and those are people that now we'd be looking for to come into management roles, people with lots of experience in construction. So that pool is really, really small. And also then people who left the trades, they might have migrated, or they might have gone into a completely different industry. And aside from that, then people that might have naturally followed their parents into the industry didn't. So to put it into context, when you talk about the skilled trades, the recently released report on the analysis of skills for residential construction and retrofitting, which is up to 2030, outlined that we needed 50,000 new entrants into the construction industry to meet the targets. And in 2023, we only had 1,500 new entrants into the construction apprenticeships. So, in order to meet our housing targets, we need more people into the trades, and we need more people into the construction management and engineering roles. So it has an impact on our business, it has an impact on our industry, and it has an impact socially on the availability of housing into the housing stock.
Yeah, I actually seen something recently on LinkedIn where it's showing Ireland has the highest per capita of third level degree qualified graduates. Like there's very few, if you look at us compared to Germany, the people who go into trades, we're very low.
Yeah.
So yeah, educating all the kids, and everyone's looking for degrees at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of routes into all industries, but speaking to construction, there needs to be a huge increase in the marketing of, trades and apprenticeships as a viable career option. I think, there's a lot being done with generation apprenticeship and the Taoiseach is pushing it really, but it'll take a number of years for that to feed through into, you know, the sites and into the management
Yeah,
roles, that
yeah.
we look for.
And I think people don't realize that the trades salaries are quite good, like they're above average once you're qualified and up and
Yeah,
running.
absolutely. And there's a whole piece around earning when you learn, I know, it can be difficult probably to move from another industry into but if you're leaving school and going straight into an apprenticeship, you're earning while you go, It's
Yeah,
it's one route into the industry. I mean, we have on our sites about 2,000 skilled tradespeople doing the work through subcontractors, and our own employees then would be about 450 overall, but about 220 of those are the management teams on each of the sites managing the work the subcontractors are doing. So, it's a significant number of people that we would have day to day on our sites.
brilliant. Thanks, Millie. I went a little bit off topic there. Sorry.
So did
Um,
I.
we'll just shift gears a little bit and talk about the opportunity that comes with diversifying talent pools. Research from McKinsey shows that companies with a diverse workforce are 35% more likely to financially outperform their competitors, which is very interesting. So by hiring a broader range of talent, businesses are not only filling those hard to fill roles, but also gaining and regaining a really competitive edge in innovation, improved decision making, and ultimately driving higher profitability. So I'll do this question for you, Tegman, if that's okay. What are your
Yep.
thoughts on the importance of diversifying talent pools?
Well, I mean, it's really been seen as a benefit. Just the other week, I was in Brussels as part of. You mentioned I managed a number of kind of EU-funded projects in Ireland. One called Displaced Talent for Europe that we worked with IOM and Fragaman. There was a 2-day conference in Brussels, and one of the sessions I was involved in was a focus on employers. And there was David Crawford, managing partner of Fragaman. There was Jessica White, she's head of social impact at LinkedIn for EMEA and LATAM. There was Anthony Catlow from NHS Professionals. They've hired a lot with us in the UK. They all spoke about the need now for kind of talent acquisition, hiring managers and businesses generally, to invest in diversifying their talent pool, even if that means looking at apprenticeships. We're trying to work on train to hire models now in Ireland as well, to put in that investment. I mean, Jessica at LinkedIn was quoting stats from their own research that 97% of employers who'd hired refugees and displaced talent would recommend that. 57% said, it kind of helps with their competitiveness. Definitely, Anthony from NHS Professionals was speaking just about, how societies are diversifying, culturally and from a skills perspective as well. And, employers needed to keep up to speed with this. David Crawford spoke about Fragaman hiring displaced persons and refugees with us as well globally, and spoke a lot about kind of the positive impact on morale. Which he just said is very hard to quantify, but that morale boosting aspect is also very important with retention now, because that's also an issue. I was just looking at the news yesterday, and Ireland's still like very high up on on hiring, and there's big demand, and we're at full employment, and different ways that you can kind of retain people. Our retention rates are very high globally. I suppose after a year, it's hard to quantify, over a very long term, but they're about 97% in the UK and maybe kind of 93, 94 kind of globally. People get some of that is to do, obviously we use the permit system in Ireland. So, people are, our candidates want to go and build a secure future somewhere else. Really, that's the aim of them signing up to our services and our talent catalogue. Just speaking about skilled trades, and that's obviously a sector where we're really targeting, construction and engineering, a really big user of employment permits, and like very obvious shortages there. ODI Europe published some research earlier this year, and it did recommend kind of similar programs to us, for looking to how to kind of attract outside of a, traditional kind of talent pool. Obviously Claire works with, refugees in country and other marginalized groups. And, clearly that's obviously of great benefit as well. However, from the figures Paula quoted there, like it is not going to be possible just upskilling in country, to meet the outstanding demand, really.
Yeah, and just to finish off on that, why do you think businesses with diverse teams are perform better or more productive?
I think it's just a different mindset. I worked in politics in Ireland and for a government minister for many years, and I mean, I loved it. It was great, but nearly everybody working there was Irish and had grown up in Ireland. And there's been lots of these moves to, attract more women to boards and senior positions, and there's kind of positive discrimination, and it's because women are viewed as bringing a different mindset, to things. And Anthony Cackno mentioned it in the UK, even from a kind of nursing and healthcare perspective. He said, people whose English, when English isn't their first language, they've been very inventive in explaining to people about healthcare in a different way, instead of just, us just saying, this is how it is and using perfect English to do that. He spoke about, innovation that comes with that as well, from different upbringing, particularly in the healthcare sector. Like training is different across the globe for nurses, so people learn in a different way, and often culturally people learn in a different way. So that it all just brings new perspectives, really, and new mindsets. And another thing, often our candidates speak other languages. This was raised at the conference as well, in Brussels. It can also help businesses who are maybe looking to expand. Say if we have Arabic speakers into the Middle East, you have an Arabic speaker, already on the team. You don't have to recruit specifically for that. So I suppose there are numerous benefits, and I suppose some of that is sectoral specific as well.
Yeah, because I've lived in about 7 different countries around the world myself, and I've been in countries where I don't speak the local language, and it's something you got to learn quick. But it's good to see all the different cultures and how different people work, because a lot of people who haven't left Ireland think it's kind of the same everywhere else, but it's very, very different.
I've lived abroad as well, and I would agree it is not the same, even in other European countries.
Yeah.
But and I mean, I suppose, we're living in a global market now. As Paula said, huge numbers left construction, maybe went into another sector here, but also left the country. I know the government have been trying to attract, I think it was 100,000 construction workers, who kind of left, and looking at ways to attract them back. There's a mobile global workforce nowadays, and I have had candidates interviews for some construction roles here, and they've told me they would prefer, through our programs, to put forward for something in Canada, because there's a permanent residency, they can bring their families. It's a slower process, but what the Canadian government are maybe offering is better than here. And I've been doing some work with the Construction Industry Federation, and and at their annual conference also speaking about how to kind of improve pathways into construction as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of overseas recruitment, and one of the main ones is just cost of living. You know what I mean? Like people in their 30s want to buy a house, and it's very difficult at the moment. Yeah, that's one. So thanks a million, Tegwin. Claire, we'll move on to you. Quick one. How can companies best approach inclusive hiring for marginalized groups, and how can they ensure their hiring processes are fair and effective?
Well, I suppose first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to
thanks
be on the call with us. Great people. I've really enjoyed the discussion so far, but I suppose there's a couple of really practical things that employers can do to highlight that they are an inclusive employer and that they're thinking of these things. In the last number of years, there's been such a rise around kind of the idea of DEI or DEIB, or however we want to frame it. And all this work is going into these processes internally. Employers aren't talking about it externally. So that opportunity is right there when we're hiring, to shout about all the work that we're doing internally around our DEI initiatives, so that somebody who might be experiencing barriers or who might be marginalized within the recruitment process, they can see, oh, this employer they actually want to hear from me. They've said explicitly on their statement, on their job spec, we want to hear from candidates who have disabilities. We want to hear from a diverse candidate pool. So they're calling it out and they're naming it. I think we can sometimes take for granted the power in that diversity statement within the recruitment process. We did a piece of research about 2 years ago now, I think it was, and it was around inclusive recruitment. And we did a number of different focus groups with people who were experiencing barriers to employment within Ireland, both from rural and urban areas. The groups represented people with disabilities, neurodiverse people, members of the traveling community, people of colour, so a range of experiences. But there was that common thread of, if an employer states it and is upfront that they want to hear from a candidate like me, I'm more likely to apply. A candidate who's already experiencing barriers to recruitment are quite quick to deselect themselves from the process without seeing that kind of inclusion statement. And I suppose kind of from a really practical point of view, like, some small things around when we're like writing the job spec, when we sit down to write a job description, are we thinking of a person our ideal candidate is? If we're already saying what our ideal candidate is, we're creating that framework that some people may not fit into. So when we sit down to write that job description, rather than describing the person that we assume to be the ideal fit for the role, just describe the job. What is required in this role? And therefore we get to open up and get to see actually what other candidates can come forward with different skills. And I suppose just considering maybe other ways that people might be able to showcase their skill set within the interview setting, we don't need to be so rigid and so traditionalist about our interview processes. There are other ways that we can approach this to be more inclusive of, I suppose, diverse candidates who might be coming from a different perspective. And one of the biggest things that's always so important, particularly when it comes to the disabled community, is, are we offering reasonable accommodations, and are we being clear that we offer reasonable accommodations during our recruitment processes? And I would really encourage any employer, where you put that in your job description or on your job posting, it's so important. Have it in your job description, have it on the careers page, really kind of shout about it, say, we offer reasonable accommodation, let Claire know this phone number, this email address, whatever it is, if you have a reasonable accommodation. We know from the work we do at Open Doors that for candidates who have a disability, disclosing that you have a disability or sharing that information is a really, really daunting process. And it's so important that we make that an easy process for somebody and we can be supportive in the situation. Don't know if I've answered your question. I kind of just...
No, you have. I was just going to ask
right in there.
that. Do you think, because like people who've been writing up job specs and asking the same interview questions for years and years and years is difficult to change. So do you think something like ChatGPT could help them reword their questions and their job spec to make it more open to everyone?
Yeah, like, I mean, AI, like, I don't think necessarily, this is me with very little professional knowledge of AI now, let's be honest, I'm not an expert, but it's there to be used as a tool to benefit and support. I've also found, like, internally for ourselves at ODI, when we've been doing our own recruitment, we're hiring for somebody for a role, sitting down and really going through the competencies and the skills that's required in a role is actually a really helpful exercise. It's a helpful exercise for the manager who's involved. It's a helpful exercise then for the new employee, because there's such clarity around the expectations within that job. Now, bearing in mind, when I've spoken to other employers who say, this is all well and good, I'm under a time pressure. Like, it's not just a case I can sit down and spend all this time and, input into job descriptions. I need to get people hired because of the talent shortage that you've already acknowledged. But I suppose using a tool like ChatGPT would be really, really helpful in kind of maybe rephrasing and kind of trying to, I suppose, even reframe our own mindset and how we kind of come at the job description or the interview process.
Perfect, thanks. And what specific support and resources should HR put in place to help individuals from marginalized communities to successfully integrate into the workforce? Because I've heard and I've seen it as well, some people, when they try to do diversity hiring, it's like people leave quite quickly because they're not looked after or catered for when they start in the business. And people, I don't think, realize that they're just simple little things. It's not massive changes, but they're quite simple little things they can do to make people feel more welcome.
Yeah, it's a really huge, but I think like sometimes we talk about DEI and the kind of the B is kind of forgotten, that belonging, that sense of belonging, that's the emotional part of it. And I know it's probably not very professional to talk about it, but we stay in the jobs we're in because we feel belonging and we feel included. And that's what employers want. I do think with this question, I would view it as it's a two-way street. So there is the new candidate, the employee, but there's also the responsibility for the manager within that. So say from some practical tips for the employee coming in, and it sounds maybe really childish or silly, but a buddy system is so helpful for new starts, particularly large organizations where people are already embedded in the team. And I've seen myself, I'm a small team, we're a team of 10. Like there's things I take for granted that somebody who's new doesn't take for granted. You know, how we use Teams. Do I just call you straight away in Teams? Should I ping you and let you know I want to call you? Do I put the time in your calendar?
We're all culprits of that.
The soft skills, so that a buddy who's in a team adjacent can be really helpful. For a candidate or an employee with a disability, a reasonable accommodation passport is such a helpful practical tool. This is literally just a tool where you sit down with your new employee who might have reasonable accommodation, you assess what the reasonable accommodation is, where the barrier is within the job role, how we can remove that barrier. Okay, great. Let's reassess in 3 months. Let's reassess in 6 months. Make sure this reasonable accommodation is still appropriate. Do we need extra supports? Do I understand what's happening? For the managers, I think sometimes when we talk about hiring for more diverse talent pools, we take for granted that there is a need for cultural competency for managers to understand there's different communication skills, there are ways of communicating, there's different cultural appropriate ways of approaching different situations. And we're actually in the middle of finishing a piece of research on this like toolkit for employers, which will come into training as well. And we talk about that kind of cultural intelligence. And I think for managers, it's so important that a manager who is in an organization where we're really promoting diversity, I suppose, and inclusion and belonging, that they understand why, that they have confidence in supporting a candidate who has a disability, that they have confidence in supporting a new hire who might be from an ethnically diverse background and knows if there is maybe different approach to communications. How do I approach that conversation? Say, well, actually, that wasn't really appropriate. This is what might be the better way. And that's how you create that kind of embedding and that belonging within the team, that there is that kind of, I suppose, awareness and confidence for both the manager and the employee.
Perfect. Thanks a million. And just one last question. We'll try and keep it short because we're under pressure for time here. For companies who are starting their journey, excuse me, what are some of the steps they can take to engage with organizations like Open Doors initiative to like implement successful changes?
Reach out. Like really, honestly, you'd be surprised. Sending an email to info@opendoorinitiative.ie. You'll get a response. Happy to set up a call, chat through. If you really want to have impact, my advice is to have 1 or 2 people who will champion that going forward, because without having a driving force within the organization, sometimes these things can fall by the wayside. So giving people the, I suppose, the time and capacity and acknowledging its importance and the value behind it to really drive initiatives forward. And then lastly, ourselves at Open Doors, we have a number of programs that will link employers or our supporting partners to participants. So it could be through mentorship, it could be through employment experts, it could be through placement programs. So honestly, the first step is just reaching out to that organization saying, hey, we've seen your website, we're interested in your work. How can we work with you? How can we collaborate? Can we engage? Can we have a call? Really simple stuff.
So just taking the first step, really.
Really,
the hardest. Thanks a million. Ted, with a couple of questions for you about skills migration. How can HR teams overcome some of the common barriers that prevent skilled refugees from accessing job opportunities here?
Well, yeah, I suppose the accessibility was one of the main reasons that Talent Beyond Boundaries was kind of established in 2016. It was, obviously looking at the skills shortages globally and looking at, at the time, probably 100 million displaced people and refugees, many of whom have a lot of skills and don't have proper working rights, but also with a very strong advocacy piece. In Ireland, we're lucky, we have a very, very clear employment permit system. Now, there are restrictions within that system, although the government, is very responsive to employer needs and, and trying to adapt that. It's more people find it hard to actually access that. I do come across, we do have a lot of autonomous access cases kind of globally, where people find the job themselves and then they want us to assist more with the kind of visa aspect, and the mobility side and the integration piece, because we have a lot of experience on that. But I think it's to echo Claire's point, reaching out to organizations like Open Doors, like us if you're interested in international recruitment, and getting some advice. We do we have tips for employers. So basically, like, our scheme is employer led. They can contact me. I can give an outline of what we do and what we do with our partners, and through the STEP program. And we're working with the open community now, who are looking at adapting community sponsorship to the workplace, and with maybe a very enhanced buddy system. Or I mean, I managed an integration workshop at that conference in Brussels, and it's very key that employers have a big role in that, and we would suggest kind of reaching out and actually thinking to improve the integration into the workplace and generally, and to keep that morale, to improve those retention rates, to retain that diversity, really kind of thinking about that integration piece at kind of job offer stage, really. It's ideally, like, obviously we can give advice and we support our candidates on the one hand, with the CV preparation and interview preparation and that side, but also the employers. Like, to date, we've moved very small numbers in Ireland, just 7 in total, and that's 6 jobs. But the HSE Health Division has rehired with us. Somebody just arrived at the start of this month. A lot of employers have very good policies in place already and are very used to international recruitment. But, I think people are always hoping to learn more. Maybe how can you retain more, or how can somebody integrate quicker, or what other supports could I provide? The language piece comes up a lot, globally, and kind of in European countries, I suppose, say like in Belgium, where people might need Flemish. Here we're fortunate, not so much. English is much more widely spoken, but small things like that. But I mean, we've been very fortunate with our public and private sector hires here. The candidates are so well settled. We do a check-in, after a month. We give an employer guide as well, and we give the candidates an area guide, with all the key things. I mean, even having people in the workplace who could maybe help with advice, particularly if people bring families, do you know local schools? Do you know a good GP? Having kind of dedicated people, not necessarily the line manager, like when I started at Talent Beyond Boundaries, I just started at the end of last year. I had worked with them in a previous role at IOM, but even just having a buddy system, somebody, you were speaking about contacting someone on Teams. We use Slack a lot. I use Teams externally. Even just like, where do I find this?
Yeah.
And so kind of,
because I've employed from all around the world, and I find I've produced this kind of starter pack for people who are coming from outside of Ireland. And it is the simple things like schools and accommodation and all that kind of stuff. And even simple things like food, getting your bank account set up, all that. And over the years, it's gotten bigger and bigger. And I think I might need to look at it again. But it is, it's handy. And every time you learn something new, just throw it in the booklet.
Well, I've been adapting we do a pre-departure, we do an informed decision making with the job offer to also go through the contract, because, they tend to take a different format in different countries, and people start having questions about Ireland. We do a pre-departure training, a post-arrival. Yeah, and we've been adapting, actually, it's better if you apply for your PPS number and the employer can support with a letter, about the accommodation prior to travel, because that'll be quicker. Or, all those little, we've had different tips about maybe, where it might be easier to open a bank account. Some of our candidates definitely, want to be able to physically walk into a bank. Others are happy to do, to use online services, just all different things like that. And I mean, as you said, being aware, and, as Claire said, like, of cultural differences, things like that. We've also said, like, employers have had very legitimate questions, kind of globally, they're all concerned about accommodation because we ask that
Yeah.
the first month be provided. But, you know, other things about like our tips for the interview process explains gaps in CVs, that kind of thing, and why people might have that. But also, you know, people are wondering, like, do I speak to this person differently because they're a refugee? Should I ask about their background? You know, like ours is an employer-led process. So
Yeah.
generally, unless it's a DEI initiative, you're going through a standard recruitment process. But, you know, we just say, no, just, you know, treat somebody as
Carry on
normal.
as
Like if
normal,
they
yeah.
want to disclose something, you know,
Yeah.
they will. But I suppose it's just, I mean, and these are all really legitimate questions, you know,
Yeah.
it's just, I suppose it's just, you know, that learning piece, Claire, as you said, that kind of education piece, and then building on that experience. You know, we're all talking about handbooks and toolkits, and you know, I mean, they do work as long as you keep adapting them. You know,
Yeah, and
and
it's, look, I know from people moving over here and starting with us in the past, like it's a lot of small little things, but when you add up those small things and there's 10, 15, 20, then it becomes quite overwhelming. So if you have something in place that they just, oh, that's very simple, oh, that's very simple, I need that, it does work out quite well. Yeah. So I've another quick question for you. What are some of the key benefits for employers who integrate skilled refugees into the workplace, both from a talent perspective and a broader business impact?
I think really, you know, what I said about morale, you know, and the diversity piece, and what Claire said really as well. You know, it also helps them to attract, you know, other talent. You know, people are interested in seeing people's diversity policies. We've done quite a bit of hiring with Accenture, for example, and we're in discussions in Ireland, but, you know, globally with them. And, you know, there are kind of, you know, goals and commitments towards hiring refugees. It might not be that. It might be hiring any marginalized group. You know, the NHS are very clear of their boost of morale, as we're Fragment. You know, it's really about having that we're very, you know, we're lucky as part of our program, and I hope the Department of Enterprise don't mind me saying this, but you know, we have a contact point there, you know, that can assist with queries. But they were interviewed as part of our evaluation process for the commission, and even there, you know, they said that, you know, the people actually processing had a nice, you know, kind of, it was a great sense for them that they weren't. I mean, obviously they, you know, they value their work in processing permits anyway, you know, and doing that to meet skills shortages. But there was this kind of added feel good factor of, you know, helping displaced people and refugees. And I think if you can, you know, bottle that for your workforce, you know, people feel that sense of belonging and want to stay in their role. You know, I think people like to be proud of where they work and say what a good employer they're working for. And you know, and this is a real issue in Ireland where, you know, as I said, people are very mobile. We have virtually full employment. It's highly competitive. People, you know, I looked at, you know, remote and hybrid working, that seems to be dropping off a bit, but we're very, very high globally, you know. So this is another aspect, you know, that people are proud to say, you know, my employer, you know, has, you know, has a good hiring strategy. We have really good retention. We've really good retention because we've a lovely workplace, and people want to get up and go into work and be part of that.
Yeah, there's nothing better than employees that you're working with go around promoting your business as well.
Well, exactly. You know, they're your ambassadors, and I know that's one thing that now some of our candidates, you know, obviously don't really want to do a lot of communications work. You know, different backgrounds are different, and depending on where they're coming from, you know, there are potential dangers in that. But you know, the two that came into the private sector, like one came over to the conference to speak about it. Just internally last week, somebody else who'd moved to the UK, they met an employer and started selling the program, and you know, we're following up with that employer in the UK. You know, they met somebody, you know, at an event or socially and said, "Oh, this is how I came to the UK." You know, and I mean, nothing beats that word of mouth. Referral, you know. It's I mean, you'll know, for working in recruitment, you know, if you start hearing things, you know, about you know, if there's a lot of disgruntled employees kind of left, you know, it's not good for business. I mean, you know, there's always going to be people that want to move for various reasons, but you know, obviously, if you can retain as many people, and you know, Paula spoke about the loss of I suppose maybe not just corporate knowledge, but that kind of, when people leave, then you don't have anybody with the experience for senior positions, and you want to retain that. So, and you want a nice inclusive environment where people will share their experience, and this is all really, really good for business, at any level.
Perfect. Thanks a million. And we're running low on time here. So Paula, I've just moved to yourself here. What are some of the most effective strategies HR teams can implement to attract more gender diversity into industries or roles that are traditionally underrepresented?
I think a lot of it is around, it echoes what both Claire and Tegwin have kind of mentioned, but in terms of what we did and what we continue to do, because it's a continuous improvement process, is we looked at the process from start to finish. How inclusive was it? What language was in our job descriptions? It was pre-AI. Now I'm going back 4 or 5 years, but we continue to monitor it, and I can share the tool that we used to do that. It is a free online tool, and what it does is it picks out gender coded language, and it helps you rewrite the job description. We removed things like years of experience needed in a role, and we really do focus on skills, behaviors, and alignment with our values, so that's how we train our managers to interview, and that's how the team in talent acquisition that I oversee interviews candidates. And so everybody gets a very similar process from start to finish, whether they're interviewing for an admin role in the office, a senior leadership role, or a construction director role. So everybody gets that same experience as a candidate. We looked at as well what recruitment channels we were using, where were our candidates coming from, and could we broaden those out, and we make sure that we use a diverse range of recruitment channels. We also call out on our careers page what the process looks like. So if you're coming back to work after being out of work, if you've not worked in Ireland before, if you're a person who maybe isn't used to interviewing, or is maybe neurodiverse and like steps mapped out, go to our website. The interview process is mapped out there from start to finish, and it
Brilliant.
just helps remove some of those barriers that people may face.
Yeah.
Training for the managers, as I mentioned, we look to interview the same way. We introduced unconscious bias and ED&I training for everybody as part of recruitment training, but also across the business, just to embed that whole idea around inclusion. So everybody, we've made a commitment in our ED&I strategy to train everybody in unconscious bias and ED&I by the end of next year. So we're about 80% now completion rate. So we've a baseline there where we, not only through the hiring process, but also when people arrive into the office or on site, there's a bit of an awareness around what inclusion means, because diversity is a reality, right? We live in a diverse world.
Yeah.
And Glenveagh has done an excellent job of creating a workplace that reflects the world we live in, and that's one of our commitments, and it's called out in our ED&I strategy. The real work, which continues and needs to continue, is the inclusion piece. It's okay, everybody's here now. What do we do now to make sure everybody's included? And we're, it'll probably come up in another question, but we've a lot of strategies around how we make people feel included once they get here. But I suppose in summary, from a recruitment perspective, look at your process, make it as transparent as possible, make it as neutral as possible, and make sure your managers and anybody involved in the hiring process is aware of the requirements and how best to interview anybody that comes into the business or looking to come in, and equally that we're actually looking at data then to support how successful those strategies are. We obviously see that at the end of the talent pipeline in terms of who's hired, but we also monitor anonymously through our recruitment software who's coming into the pipeline and where they've dropped off, so that we can continue to look and say, actually, X% of people are telling us that they are a person with a disability, and that X% of applicants should make it right through the pipeline, that same proportion. So data is your friend there, I think.
Okay. And just questions, you've kind of answered half it already. What roles does company culture play in retaining female talent? And how can HR teams create an inclusive environment that supports women's career growth and leadership?
We look at leadership level. We've a really strong ED&I strategy, which we launched at the end of 22, called Building a Better Workplace. It's linked to our overall business strategy, and in it we've 3 pillars. One being inclusive environment, the other being a better representation, and the third one then being using our influence, and that's around the supply chain and how we can use our influence there. But when we talk about a better representation and an inclusive environment, we set ourselves targets around the number of graduates, female graduates coming in. So we've set a target of 30%. Our most recent graduates are kicking off their graduate program next week, and we've 36% female in. We've 43 graduates starting in the business this year, which is a phenomenal number. And that's a measure of our success. So setting targets and actually walking the talk when people get here. So through the strategy and as part of our ED&I strategy, we have the targets, but we also set up employee network groups. So we have 5 employee network groups, one being the women's ENG, and they do immense work around, networking internally. We ran a panel discussion for women on International Women's Day. We rolled out in conjunction with the network group, and we already had really, really good family-friendly policies in place for the last number of years, including flexible and hybrid working for office-based workers, paid maternity, paternity, and really flexible parental leave. But earlier in the year, we also rolled out a menopause policy and a fertility leave policy. So, yes, let's get the graduates in, but let's make sure we keep them throughout their career. And when they, if they choose to go and have a family or, go through life changes, that we have supportive policies in place to make sure that they can go off, have their family if that's what they choose to do, and come back into a supportive workplace. We have a mother's room here in head office where moms can feed or express milk for their babies. We have a quiet room, and we have a multi-faith room as well. So we really do try and make sure we cover any accommodations that people might need in terms of making the workplace inclusive and welcoming for them. So yeah, I mean, and the ENGs, we've just released a gorgeous video talking about the work that our ENGs have done, and to Claire's point, talk about what you're doing, sell it, make it real. And we're doing such great work internally to attract more people into the business. We really have to promote it externally, and that's really key as well in terms of sharing the culture externally.
Yeah. And do you find it's easier to attract more diverse set of candidates now because you've done such a good job over the last few years in the business? Do you find you're getting better applications, more applications? It's construction. It's not just all men applying. Like you're getting a much better variety, so to say.
Absolutely. I mean, if you were to just look at the gender piece, the average, in general, it's a 9% female headcount in the construction industry in Ireland. We've 33% women.
Really good.
Our board is made up of 43% female. That was one of the targets we set. Our senior management team is 14% female. We have a target set to increase that to 28%, which will take a little bit of time due to the factors we discussed earlier on. It has been a traditionally male industry, but we've pathways in place to make sure that women are set up for success here. We've a construction academy in place where we have 12 high potential candidates on it, a number of whom are women. That's a pathway into management for them. And we have last year our first trainee finishing for women was promoted in the business, and second one this year. So I believe we might be the first construction company to have those roles in place, but maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm not 100%, but certainly hugely successful in their own right in the roles they were doing, but so successful that we were able to put them on those pathways. So a lot of change has happened in our industry, and we really feel that it's important for us to showcase that change that Glenveagh has made, because it benefits us, of course, but it also benefits the wider industry.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Just one last question, really going out to everyone. How can HR leaders influence senior management to commit to diversity and inclusion as a core organization value rather than just compliance? So if anyone wants to take that, I'd like an answer for all three if you can help. I know from talking to companies, because doing recruitment, things there, we have to do this. It's not we want to, it's something we've been talking about. We need to get this across the line kind of thing. So how do we change people's mindsets around that?
I would say, use the data. I mean, that's your best business case, isn't it? If you are for whatever reason, it doesn't sound like it would happen in Paula's workplace or Claire's. But if you are coming up against that pushback, we've been very fortunate. You were speaking about champions, like a few people that we're in discussions with now, are pushing that kind of up the line, in large companies and multinationals, because they're interested. I mean, it is important to have, was it Claire who said, have a champion for this, driving this. But if you do really believe in this and feel strongly, about that, there are workplaces, aren't there, with, different groups set up to try and promote different things within the workplace. I mean, do the research, it's out there. You've quoted, McKinsey and other things there. I was saying LinkedIn stats. I mean, use the data to show, why this is a good idea, whether that's, for any marginalized group, I mean, obviously I'm saying use it for displaced people and refugees, to meet your skills shortages, but it goes across the board, doesn't it?
Perfect.
The importance.
That's brilliant. Thanks a million. And Claire or Paul, anything to add to that?
I mean, I agree completely, obviously, with the idea of the kind of the winning the hearts and minds. So like the business case for diversity, it's not just the right thing to do. It makes good business sense for your organization to engage in this. I think Glenveagh is obviously a really good example of that. You can see that data impact. And I think I'm so impressed actually about what Paula was saying, that in terms of the recruitment process, being able to track that data line. And I think, don't underestimate the value of doing that and being able to grow to the senior leadership team with that information. But I do think there's also that kind of the hearts piece, and what Tegwin was saying about the individual who went and spoke about their experience and the positive impact it's had on their life, and actually the value in the human story of behind this. That it's, we've got that business case, but we've also got, it's actually a person at the end of this story that has had a positive impact, and who, in this instance, perhaps they had to flee war and they've had to move their whole life, their family. And what does that actually mean? The positivity that can have on an individual. But I suppose the work that we've done and what I've found is having that buy-in and that investment from senior leadership can't be underestimated. And it should be a key pillar in the strategy of moving forward with DEI. Like, we need to have senior management involved. And whether that is, and I know it's difficult, but trying to get even like a half an hour, 40-minute workshop as well, so that they can also be shown, this is why we're doing this, and kind of any questions, any fears, creating that space to ask those questions and answer those questions, I think is really important as well, and kind of allowing them the opportunity to learn and gain confidence in this area.
Perfect. Thanks a million. And Paula?
Yeah, I mean, excellent points made by Tegwin and Claire. I totally agree and echo them. The data, both externally in the likes of McKinsey and other research, but internally as well. And also, if you can get your hands on any industry data, that will also support your business case. It is really about the hearts and minds. So if you can get people to tell those stories and share their stories, that will work both from an internal perspective, but equally externally, to help, bring your policies and practices to life. And really then that's where the change happens. It's, where people are coming into the business and they've seen the impact that it's had on them as an individual and their career and the benefit to the business. So if you can get people to share their stories as well, that will also add weight, I think, to the business case. Yeah.
That's all kind of all we have time for. We've run out of time here. Look, thanks a million for joining us. Really interested, really insightful, helpful. And I know, like, if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to either Tegwin or Claire. I know Paul is working very hard, so I don't know if you have time to answer a load of questions.
By all means, happy to connect with anyone and chat through anything that might help. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Look, thank you again. It was very nice to meet you all. Lovely to have a chat, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye-bye.
Bye.